Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, The Future of Work, Upgrading Your Building Science Toolkit. I'm Steve Abercrombie with the Sustainable Building Science Technology program at South Seattle College. And I'm truly excited to have a great conversation with 4 leaders in building science and energy efficiency this evening. If you haven't heard, hey Sarah, could I get the next slide? If you haven't heard of our program, the Sustainable Building Science Technology program at South Seattle College, we offer a Bachelor's of Applied Science focused on training the next generation of diverse leaders in the built environment. It's a 2-year work-compatible program for people with an associate's degree. The Sustainable Building Science Technology, or SBST program, is designed as an executive style program where we have in-person, or in our current environment, synchronous meetings for 4 Saturdays per quarter. I'm also really excited, and Sarah, if I could get the next slide, to announce that we have rolled out the MOET, or Multi-Occupation in Engineering and Technology degree. For folks that don't have that associate's degree, we offer this accelerated associates for people that have 3 or more years of military or work experience. Participants in the degree can earn an associate's in applied science in 6 months or less, with the majority of their credit coming from documenting on-the-job experience and training. If anyone in the audience would be interested, or they know anyone that might be interested in the Sustainable Building Science Technology, or MOET program, we'd love it if you could contact myself or Alexandra Steele. If you're an employer, we also have 30 amazing SBST students in the program and expect dozens of MOET students coming in. We are all about hands-on learning and student contributions to industry and making those network connections. For example, we've had the opportunity in the past to work with our friends at McKinstry, where our students were able to do a number of building tune-ups through the City of Seattle's Accelerator program in educational facilities, working in conjunction and shadowing the McKinstry team. If you might be interested in these type of opportunities, please get a hold of us, and we would love to get in touch about additional partnerships. So with that, I really want to thank Alexandra Steele from South Seattle College and Tanya Beavers from the WSU Energy program for organizing this event. They've been putting in a ton of hard work to herd all of us cats here on the panel and get the word out about tonight's event. So with that, I'll move on to what everybody actually came for, and that is our amazing panelists. Sarah, if you could advance to the next slide for me. A little bit about our panelists. Here on my Zoom left is Melanie Danuser, the Director of Education and Training with NEEC and the Smart Buildings Center. We have Justin Falstrom, the Regional Director of Western Washington Energy at McKinstry. Roger Ebbage, the Director of Energy Management and Water Conservation Programs at Lane Community College in Eugene, Oregon. And Karen Janowitz, the Program Coordinator at WSU Energy Program. So we're gonna launch in and ask each of our panelists to do a brief introduction and tell us a little bit about themselves and their current work. Melanie, could we get you to start?
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Steve. My name is Melanie Danuser. As Steve mentioned, I am the Director for Education and Training at the Northwest Energy Efficiency Council and Smart Buildings Center. The Northwest Energy Efficiency Council is a 501c6 trade association, which provides advocacy for those in the energy efficiency field, and it's been around for over 20 years. More recently, about 5 years ago, the Smart Buildings Center was founded, and it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization associated with NEEC. And our overall mission at the Smart Buildings Center is to accelerate the adoption and promotion of smart buildings technologies and practices. We support that mission through 3 pillars of activity, which are education and training, community engagement, and technology demonstrations. The Smart Building Center is designed as a place and a program to serve those in the energy efficiency and smart buildings industries. We provide a resource for those communities to convene, exchange ideas, and improve the building stock in the Pacific Northwest. As you can imagine, the current health situation has changed how we can engage with our industry, but we have reopened our space to a limited capacity, as well as our tool lending library, and built out some virtual resources for the industry as well. I'm going to, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, I'm going to focus on 2 resources available through the Smart Building Center that I think are most applicable to our audience and our topic for tonight, though I do encourage you to reach out and find out more about SBC and NEEC and how we can help you. I've provided my email address here on this slide. So first I want to talk quickly about the Building Operator Certification Program. It's a training and credentialing program for those in the operations and maintenance and energy management fields. I will probably talk a little bit more about the BOC program and the topics that it covers later in our conversation. But I also wanted to touch on the Tool Lending Library, which is another great resource available to Washington State and Oregon State as well. We have over 100 different types of diagnostic tools available free of charge to borrow if you're in Washington or Oregon. If you're in the area, you're welcome to stop by our actual library. We're located in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of Seattle. If not, we do ship tools within the 2 states and are happy to do that. So again, if you have any questions, I've provided my contact information here, and please reach out and learn more about all that we do, and I'll touch a bit more on the BOC program a little bit later in the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Melanie, and really excited to hear about the new curriculum that's being rolled out in the BOC program. And I'm picking up some equipment from the Tool Lending Library next week to monitor an air handling unit and do some thermal comfort monitoring. So I can put a plug in for both of the programs myself.
Great, thanks, Steve.
So next is Roger Ebbage. And Roger, can you tell us a little bit about what you have? I think we might have a little slide juggle. Sarah, could you move forward to, there we go.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about the awesome work you have going on down at Lane in Eugene.
That's generous, Steve. Thanks very much. And I want to second the tool lending library comments. I don't know if you guests took a look at some of the tools that Melanie identified, but those are toys. I mean, those are so much fun to use and have. And the cool part about it is you can actually see what's going on with your building with the variety of tools that they have there. And so if you don't know anything about it, I would get a hold of Melanie and do some investigating, because it is fantastic to have that resource here in the Northwest and wherever else she's sending to. I don't know where she's going, but with them. But at any rate, my name is Roger Ebbage. I'm at Lane Community College in Eugene, Oregon. I've been there since 1989. Yeah, old guy. And I've been running an energy management program since 1992. It is focused on commercial building energy efficiency. It's a degree program, and so students come out with an Associate of Applied Science degree. And interestingly enough, they go to work. I mean, they go to work everywhere, and not just in Eugene, Oregon, or the state of Oregon, or Western United States. They go everywhere. I have students that have gone, those that have been willing to relocate have gone back to the East Coast. Some are working internationally. Excuse me. So it's a great program. Our current focus is on building control systems, and so we do a very basic foundation of energy efficiency, and then we overlay that content with 5 courses in building automation systems. And the reason why we do that is because that's where the labor market is now. I have not seen, since 1992, I have not seen such a hot labor market that is part of our industry, the energy efficiency industry. So the slide that you have up there now reflects what we are doing currently with through an award from the Federal Department of Energy. And that is, we are creating an apprenticeship program. I didn't tell you, but our 2-year degree program, very much like Steve's, is fully online. Students never have to come to my college to do any hands-on work or anything related to the program. Everything is online. And we have received an award from the Department of Energy where we are going to create a registered apprenticeship program associated with my 2-year degree. So students, and this is what the slide is depicting, students will come into the program, they'll do 2 years of energy studies and have some hands-on work during those classes that they're taking to get their degree. And then they do 2,000 hours of hands-on training out in the field somewhere. It's a paid apprenticeship program, just like a very traditional and typical apprenticeship program. And then they sit for one of 3 exams, either the Association of Energy Engineers Certified Energy Managers exam, or the BOC has a comprehensive exam that is ISO/ANSI accredited, which is a significant accreditation. And then I work with the Association of Controls Professionals, and we are currently creating a similar exam, not in content, but it's an ISO ANSI accredited exam. So we're really thrilled about it. We're launching as soon as we can possibly get it off the ground. So look for enrollment starting in this program, the apprenticeship program, starting fall of 2021. We're really excited about it. And I will say that we own the license to offer the building operator certification for the state of Oregon. So if you have any interest in attending those courses, please get a hold of me. And I'll just wrap up with reminding you that all of our classes are entirely online, and they've been online for a couple of years now. So certainly not as long as Steve's, but we're there, we're in it. So thank you very much, appreciate it, and thank you for attending today.
Thank you so much, Roger. And again, great synergy with the work you're doing with the BOC certification and offering that down at Lane. The work that Melanie's doing nationwide and up here in Washington.
Right.
So our next panelist is Justin Falstrom from McKinstry, and Justin, we're looking forward to you bringing this amazing industry perspective that you have. It looks like you're the one that's currently in the office working hard away. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. And I will second Roger's statement there regarding building controls. The needs in the industry right now is a hot market. That's definitely something that we'll probably talk about later on tonight. But yes, I am in the office. I think I may be the last person in the office tonight, except for our great janitorial staff here, making sure that those of us that do show up have a nice, clean, healthy, safe environment to arrive to. Wanted just a little bit about McKinstry. We're known, depending on where you may sit, for a lot of different things. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, you might know us as a mechanical, electrical construction company. We do work primarily as a subcontractor in Washington and Oregon, related on new buildings and building retrofits. And then across the country, we're known as an energy services contractor, or an ESCO, in 23 offices across the country. We're kind of growing slowly and methodically into various markets in the U.S. And it's kind of a fun place to be right now, not only with just how exciting energy efficiency is for some of us that really enjoy it, but just there's a lot of focus on this industry right now, and it's, for those of us that have been in it for a while, pretty exciting. Last year, McKinstry rebranded rededicated our mission to make every building we touch more efficient. And if we can pivot to the next slide, we can just sort of show some of the many offerings that McKinstry has to our customers and clients out there related to buildings. Everything from the design and construction of new buildings and energy using systems, all the way to, commissioning and turning over those buildings to make sure they're more as efficient as possible, coming back to buildings we've built sometimes over the last 60 years or been participants in building, or existing buildings and doing big retrofit projects. Melanie Melanie used to sit every day in a building called Pacific Tower here in Seattle that several people on this, or probably many people on this call, have been to for various reasons, but McKinstry was a participant in that project in a large energy retrofit to the building, an old 1920s building here in Seattle. It's kind of an icon. So we get into a lot of different aspects of the built environment, and from the top down, we're really focused on doing everything we can to make them as efficient as possible within whatever the constraints are that a client has, whether it be budget or tenants or end use or whatever it might be. Really excited about the things that are happening in Washington State relative to clean buildings initiatives from the state. It was mentioned earlier in the intro that Steve did about the Seattle Building Tune-Up program that was here. We were excited to be part of the sort of industry side of figuring out how to make that work and to see all the cool things that are coming from that. So we kind of get into a lot of different things here at McKinstry that might look a little bit daunting, and it's hard to compare us to any one particular company out there. But the aspects that McKinstry brings to the built environment are pretty universal depending on which part of the industry you're really looking at. So excited to be a participant here tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin. Great to have you. And it was a lot of fun getting to know you early on in the Pacific Tower project. Well,
I think it was a great job to be part of and a great job to be finished with, I think, to say that. It's hard it's like that building is like owning a wooden boat, I used to say. Like we start at one end and you fix everything, and then you got to start at the other end and keep going, or back at the beginning to keep going. So
it's not finished.
I guess that's the great part, and the reason we're here to talk about the amazing jobs in our buildings today, because they are never finished and they're continuing to be more opportunity all the time.
Absolutely.
So last but certainly not least, we have Karen Janowitz with the WSU Energy Program. And Karen, thanks again to you and Tanya for helping organize and sponsor this webinar this evening.
My pleasure. I'm happy to go back to my slides now, since we've looked at them a little bit already. So thank you for this opportunity to be here. I am a project manager at the Washington State University Energy Program, which is in Olympia, Washington. And WSU Energy Program, it's a self-supporting department within the university. We're kind of like a consulting company. We've got energy engineers, specialists, technical experts, software experts, and we provide energy services, education, and information. And what I want to talk about are two programs that we've got or that we're involved with. Although a third program I'm involved with is with Bonneville Power Administration with their Emerging Technologies program, Energy Efficient Emerging Technologies. Now I will talk about the Resource Conservation Management Program. I've worked with this for over 10 years. It's supported by the Washington Department of Commerce through a US DOE State Energy Program grant. And WSU supports and promotes public sector resource conservation managers in Washington State. And for those of you who don't know what RCMs are, they continuously measure, track, monitor, and pay attention to energy and water resources, as well as waste in buildings, in facilities, and work to reduce consumption and maintain that reduction in consumption and in costs. And this is especially important when there is staff turnover or changes in the building and in systems. It's an integrated approach. Many of you might have heard of strategic energy management. It uses those principles, such as reducing energy use through no and low cost efforts, occupant education, and also identifying capital projects and other projects and retrofits. We support RCMs and encourage their people to hire RCMs in Washington State and elsewhere. The skills, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, that are needed for a good RCM are, of course, knowing about building systems and having a good aptitude, but just as importantly, communication skills, because RCMs talk with managers and with the school boards and people to convince them how important it is to do retrofits or to implement certain measures in order to reduce their energy. Communication's extremely important. And as you can see, my information is on this slide. So next slide, please. Relatively recently, we have started as the support structure for the Washington State Clean Buildings High Performance Standard. And a couple of people have mentioned this already. This is super exciting. We're the only state in the country that is doing a statewide performance standard. This is a busy slide. I'm not going to read it. This is there for you to read later. I don't have time to get into talking about the standard very much, but the point of this slide is that there will be a call for more building professional roles. So the whole point of this is that you are needed if you go into this industry. So RCMs, energy managers, energy auditors, commissioning professionals, etc. There are some links on this slide for more information. And if you go through a program at South Seattle College or Lane, or take the BOC courses, that will contribute towards your certifications, your qualifications to be able to get some of these jobs. I think that's all that I will say right now.
Thank you so much, Karen. And that's a perfect segue into the first question that we have for the panelists. And I'll look towards the founding faculty of the Sustainable Building Science Technology Program, Vicki Hardy. So I think we were trying to find a couple of words to sum up all the amazing jobs that there are out there for people in buildings. And we started to use the term building professional. And so I'll turn to the panelists. And Karen, why don't we start with you? When you hear the term building professional, what do you think of?
Well, I am a little tainted by working with resource conservation managers for so long, but I think of someone who knows about building systems and can see the building as a whole and how the systems work with each other. And very importantly, to keep occupants safe and comfortable. So it's not just looking at lighting systems or HVAC, but it's looking at it as the whole. That's all I'll say for now.
Thank you so much. Hey, Roger, what about you? What do you think? What do you think of when you hear the term building professional?
Well, I'll have to agree with Karen. It is that all-inclusive information bank. You know, somebody that can walk into a building, maybe here's something that's going a little haywire, maybe a motor bearing is running low, or can talk to the board and say, look, this is what we're trying to do here. And pay attention because this is going to save you guys some money. And then, you know, being somebody that can communicate with the building occupants is really important because, you know, one great thing about controls is that we kind of take building occupants out of the control of the building for the most part, not totally, but so somebody that can is a good communicator. And I think Alex mentioned that already, so.
Thank you very much. And we hear that again and again, how critical communications is in the space to being a building professional.
Right.
Justin, I think you are a building professional. What do you think of when you hear the term?
Communication's overrated, really.
Thank you, Justin.
I think from my aspect, it's really someone that it's kind of multifaceted, as I think as Karen and Roger have already said. So I would say someone that knows how to design and build buildings would be considered a building professional. Someone that understands how building systems do or really should work would be a building professional. And then also someone that understands how people interact with those buildings. So it can be, kind of a lot of those things in between there. There's a role for someone that could call themselves a building professional in my mind.
Fantastic, thanks. Hey, Melanie, what about you?
Yeah, when I stumbled into the building industry from a job posting on Craigslist 8 years ago, I've been in the energy efficiency and generation industry for longer, but it really became clear to me that, you walk into any building and you don't realize that all the work that goes into designing the building, the concept of the building, operating and maintaining. So when I think of a building professional, I really think of someone who interacts with buildings in any form or fashion. Like anything, buildings have a life cycle. So I think of building professionals, of those who work on or in buildings, from design, conceptualization, operations and maintenance, all the way to decommissioning and ensuring respect for buildings when they are no longer operable or needed. And broadly, then I would expand that definition to those whose work involves buildings really in a more nebulous way, like myself and others on tonight's call, on the peripheral of the definition of building professionals.
Thank you so much. And likewise, I see, Roger, do you have one more?
I just want to talk about something that Melanie said in terms of it being just like this whole thing, and everybody that interacts with the building, I would consider a building professional. And I'll talk a little bit about the BOC. We are currently doing a full BOC program with a school district here in Oakland, and our participants are the custodians. Great. Building professionals. I mean, those people will come out knowing more about how their building operates than a typical custodian, because they're given the professional development opportunity to learn about it. And so I very definitely would classify them as building professionals.
Yeah, great point.
Great point, and absolutely. And I think we all see more and more that the requests from everybody working in buildings or associated with buildings are continuing to grow. They want more skills, more effort and more knowledge. And so it's a great time and a great opportunity to be in this space. So speaking of that, what skills are needed to operate, manage, and tune up buildings as they're becoming smarter and greener? Roger, I'll pitch it back to you. What do you see as kind of some of those core skills that are needed today?
Well, of course, thanks, Steve. Of course, understanding how systems work, and as Karen said, how they interact with one another. I mean, before we had LEDs, we were always concerned about changing from incandescents to fluorescent lighting, because incandescents had such a huge impact on the heating and cooling of the building. You turn an incandescent on, and most of the energy that comes out of that thing isn't in light, it's in heat, and it would impact the space. So having a good understanding of the system interaction. But when we were putting this thing together, Steve, I mentioned with my long time, with the longevity that I've had in this industry, we always get together nationally and talk about, well, what technical skills or what skills do we need in this for people to be successful? And it always bounces back to the soft skills. Again, communication. You have to be able to communicate what it is that you need. But I mean, things like being a good employee and everything that entails. And then your technical skills are an added benefit.
Fantastic, thank you. Karen, what are you seeing from your perspective, particularly as you're starting to guide a lot of this program work for this new Clean Buildings Act world?
Right. Well, that's still very new, so we're waiting to see how that works. But communication is huge, and along with the communication, I would say skills on how to read graphs and tables, because a lot of what building some building professionals will do is take the information from the building systems and from the controls and such, and then they have that, and then how do you translate that into, I'll say, layperson's terms, so that the director of human resources, or people who are non-building professionals, can understand and help make decisions. So that communication is super important. So really it's a lot of what Roger said. And I will say that the technical skills are important, but I have often said if you have the aptitude for it, you can learn that as well. But the communication skills, the soft skills, are very important.
Thank you, and I wholly agree, both with the soft skills and then from the hardcore data analytics through to the visualization, and then the ability to change that data into information and change minds and make a presentation, whether it's to a layperson or in the boardroom. We continue to see and hear that being a critical element, as buildings are such a core cost center in so much of our, so many industries and so many allied industries. Melanie, what about you? You know, particularly with the revamp that's been going on in BOC, what are kind of these skills that you're trying to bring to people and have them develop?
Great, thanks, Steve. Yeah, and we keep alluding, you know, to the revamp of BOC, and I do have that, you know, queued up for an answer to another question. But in preparation for that, as an accredited certification program, we, you know, periodically review our curriculum, ensure that what we're training to is actually what operations and maintenance professionals are doing on a day-to-day basis. So we just actually distributed a job task analysis late 2019, and some of the skills that we heard back from and the feedback we received related to the evolving nature of the work for those in operations and maintenance. You guys just touched on the, you know, number one, data collection and analysis. Everywhere anyone who works with buildings looks, there's that word, you know, data. And then what do I do with that data? So I think operators need to know what data is being collected, how they can use it to improve their buildings' efficiency, the productivity and health of their occupants, and how to store it and refer to it long-term to assess trends in energy consumption, occupancy, how their buildings are being used in compliance with, you know, some of the policies that are being enacted here in Washington State and nationally. Another thing that came up that is, you know, fairly is getting more focus, I guess, it's not new, but the resiliency of buildings. As we install more and more smart technologies in buildings, it opens up opportunity for both breaches in security, data leaks. You know, I think Target a couple of years ago, they actually got in through the HVAC system to steal a bunch of credit card information. So hearing a lot from our operators on resiliency of buildings and how they are, you know, being asked to provide critical support during periods of electrical or internet downtime. They need to know how to operate these systems to, and also preventive maintenance to avoid those, you know, to avoid catastrophic failures. I am not a controls professional, but, you know, I think right up there with data is controls, including programming controls, occupancy schedules, set points, sequence of operations, you know, all come up in our daily conversations, verifying building automation systems. These are all things that really optimize the performance, the comfort of buildings. And then when you're having, you know, I really like the emphasis on the soft skills and the communication. So then when you're having those hot and cold calls and you're talking to occupants, you actually can, you know, make a difference, take it back and look at, you know, what's happening in their space. As well as being able to communicate, you know, as you mentioned, in the boardroom, in the C-suite, and I'll talk more a little bit later on the new BOC level 2 that really gives operators and energy managers the opportunity to put together a building walkthrough plan and make their case for, whether it's low cost, no cost operational improvements, capital investments. So I think that's what we're hearing from operations and maintenance professionals on the skills that they need to adequately do their job, which looks a lot different than it did 5 years ago.
Thank you. What a range that we're seeing in the kind of continuing set of developing skills that we're needing for folks to be successful in buildings. All right, Justin, tell us how it is. You're living this every day. What are you seeing?
All right. Well, I think we've covered the communication thing. I'm not going to hit on those points that I wrote down to make sure I covered it, but I will say that is definitely important. If I could just say that all of the skills are needed anymore to really operate, manage, and tune up buildings, whether that be the ability to actually like talk human to human with someone, that's super important right now. The ability to talk with very technical people and translate, that's very important. But really where we find that we need, where people have the most success, or where we're really missing folks from the pool of candidates that we see, is people that understand how systems interact with one another. That sort of curiosity to say, we can no longer be just sort of siloed in, I am a controls person, or I am a water balancer, or I am a sheet metal guy. It really comes down to make buildings truly work, you need to have some people on the team that are really looking at the whole thing, because there are so many interactive effects now between power quality and new equipment that's being put in. And especially if you're working in a retrofit environment or existing buildings, things don't work like they're supposed to usually the first time. And it takes a lot of like fine tuning and tweaking to be able to make them, truly operate as intended. And so really having people that think bigger than just maybe their own bit of expertise that would have been fine for them 25, 30 years ago, now is a lot different. The systems are just so much more complicated than they ever used to be, being driven by code or technology, that things are definitely not as robust and sort of easy to sort of just make work. They really do require some technical expertise that you can then figure out how to translate issues and problems back to the layperson for remedy often. So.
Thank you so much. And I think we had a fantastic comment from a member of the audience. Perry Springs says that very much. It's first the ability to identify systems, and then where are the interfaces between the systems. Pay attention to those system interfaces. So I think absolutely it's about those intersections where the richness happens, and done right, it's great. And when it's not done right, we're spending a lot of time fixing it. Well, let's turn maybe to just a quick popcorn question, and just ask folks 2 or 3 words that might sum up your job right now. And I'll say for mine, sheer excitement. I was able to engage in a video filming on our campus where we're developing a 360 video tour so people can actually come in and have a VR experience. If we're not actually able to be in buildings as much in COVID, we're gonna have the ability to do that on a desktop or wearing goggles in our curriculum. So, I totally nerded out on that, and that, sheer excitement are the 2 words that come to me for my job. Karen, what about you? What are a few jobs that are summing up, or a few words that are summing up your job right now?
I was very literal in in that question. I'd say education on benchmarking, because that's really what is needed first and foremost for the performance standard, the Washington State Clean Buildings Performance Standard, and then a lot of my other work is contract management and communication with energy programs. And well, I'll do one other thing. Even though I do contract management, I know 2 or 3 words, right? Even though it's contract management and communication, I love learning about all of the new emerging technologies, all of the new, everything that comes across my desk, I read that stuff. So that is a huge plus in my job, that it's really a learning job, even though some of what I do is paperwork and emails. It's also learning about the building, the energy efficiency industry.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that's what attracts so many of us to this industry, is that we always have to learn and always have the opportunity to continue to learn. Justin, what about you? What are a few jobs that are summing up, a few words that are summing up your job right now?
Well, I would say uncertain is definitely a big one. Our team has really gone through a lot of upheaval in the way we did work from March until now. We have a big office here in Seattle, and there are very few of us that are actually coming in. Most everybody is working remotely, which was something that I think we eventually would have gotten to, but it sort of happened very quickly. It's exciting right now. I think that with a lot of the new technologies that are coming out, potential changes with our way of looking at energy as a country are really exciting. But at the same time, I view scary as well. There's that sort of not knowing what's coming next with our sort of global health scheme and how that'll impact industry and just all of us is a little bit. It definitely makes me feel a little nervous some days. So trying to work through all that.
I second you there. I never thought how much I'd question getting out of the bubble of my house every time we depart right now. So.
Yeah, I never thought I'd have to wipe down a bag of chips before I'd eat it, but I've had to do that. So,
Melanie, how about you?
Yeah, let's see. I, when I was preparing for this question, I had fast-paced, flexible, and fun, right? It's I'm an eternal optimist, so the past several months have been challenging. Let's just pivot our entire delivery model that we've had for 20 years completely and turn it on its head. But it's been a great learning experience. So I think there's opportunity to learn and grow, and it's exciting to talk to our students that that's our passion, is to get people trained, and it's exciting to see them respond to the changing environment, both for learning and also the changing environment in the buildings where they work. So just a good lesson in being flexible and nimble and remembering to have a little bit of fun, because there is a lot of, to Justin's point, apprehension just in our day-to-day, whether professional or personal lives. So
love the optimism, and I'll echo there too that having families close at hand often get us to remember that fun, or if we don't, they'll remind us real quick.
Yeah,
so.
The 4 and 5-year-old kids in my house probably help with that.
Hey Roger, what are a few words that are summing up your work right
now? The first word is, it's obvious that we all know one another and we all work with one another pretty frequently. And, I report to Melanie for our BOC stuff. I transfer students from my program up to Steve's program. We have an articulation agreement. But I want to say one of the greatest benefits of knowing people well in our industry is that Karen puts out one of the best newsletters that I have ever seen in this industry. And like I said, I've been in this sucker for a long time. And so I always look forward to Karen's monthly newsletter. It just rocks. And hopefully she will put something up, or maybe I didn't see, Karen, is it on your slides, the URL to your newsletter?
No, but people can contact me.
Or throw it in the chat box. Maybe you can put it in the chat box.
And we'll make sure
it's really great newsletter. So I want to say, and I'll go back to my introduction, that we have been doing online training for a couple of years now. And so while my entire campus and campuses across the country were running around with their hair on fire thinking, now what do we do? How do we train our people? What's going on? We just opened up another cohort in the fall and did what we do. And so the cool thing about that, though, is being recognized by the Department of Energy, who I have mentioned in the past, gave us this award to take that online content and roll it into an apprenticeship program. So creating anything new is always fun. I mean, that is just a joyful experience, and that's what I'm working on now.
Thank you, and hear you there. Creation is it is so much fun, and I think everybody here is doing a little bit of that in their own ways. Well, maybe we can move on, and I think the heart of this for some of us is about opportunities that are available for training, certification, and education. We've all talked to that a little bit, but you know, I'm interested in digging in a little bit deeper and hearing about those opportunities and why they're so important for people that are working in the built environment. So, Karen, can I start with you again? Hear a little bit more from you on that topic.
Sure, because Roger gave me such a great segue. Thank you, Roger. I turned a little red there. I was going to start with a different publication. Well, I'll start with the newsletter. We do monthly newsletter for RCMs, and we do have a contract for it, and so it is supposed to be for public sector resource conservation managers and energy managers, predominantly in Washington State. But you know, with Roger, I haven't gotten them in a while, I don't think, but people would be in Roger's classes at Lane or graduate and hear about the RCM program and the newsletter, and I would sign them up on the listserv so that they would get that. Because sometimes there are job opportunities. I only put energy manager and RCM opportunities up there. And there are fewer RCM opportunities these days. I hope that will change. But I also, in the newsletter, there are articles that are hopefully very pertinent to RCMs as well. And also a lot of trainings, classes, all sorts of events. Some are free. I always have the BOC list for both Washington State and for Oregon. And then announcements, things that people should know about grants in Washington State, although those are for those who are really kind of working in the business already. I also wanted to point people to a publication that we did recently called The Alphabet Soup of Energy Efficiency Workforce Certification. And I had to use the word alphabet soup because if you start looking at it, you've got C and B, P, you've got all of these letters behind them. And BOC is one of them as well. But that it's in one place, you can see the different certifications that the students and professionals can work towards to get perhaps other jobs or get raises in the industry. And you can find that at the Resource Conservation webpage for WSU Energy Program. So all of those are, you know, I tripped on that second part of the question. Why are they important for people working in the built environment? Because they are. It's knowledge. You need to know this to do a good job. You need to keep up with the industry. You need to learn about controls. With my work with Bonneville, I am very aware of emerging technologies. I put some of that into the newsletter because that will be up and coming, that if someone's not working on it now, they might be. They need to know about these things because it helps them keep a job and get a job.
Thank you. And yes, I think we often talk about in our program that the pace of change in both technical information and products and technologies in the built environment is moving faster than it ever has in the history of in our history. So you've got to stay abreast, you've got to stay apace, and you've got to keep learning in order to stay relevant. Melanie, you want to talk a little bit about training and certification and education opportunities and why they're important?
Sure, thank you. And Karen touched on this a bit about the different approaches when it comes to training for building professionals. There's categories for training that include targeted, short continuing education sessions, webinars, seminars, workshops that really focus on one technology or system or strategy. And then there are certification and certificate programs like the ones that the Smart Buildings Center runs with the BOC. And then of course, more intensive programs, associate's and bachelor's degree programs like Roger and you, Steve, are offering. So I'm going to talk about what I know best, which is the Building Operator Certification Program. We have 2 levels of training available, and BOC is available. I know most of this audience, I think, is probably Northwest centric, but BOC is an international now training and credentialing program. We're in 37 US states and Canada. And level 1 training is designed for professionals with a couple of years experience looking to get a better handle on a holistic view of building systems, how they work together. I think we talked a little bit about the interfaces, right, between the building systems and how when those are working together and operated correctly, optimal performance of the building when it comes to and energy savings can happen. We alluded to the level 2 training, which is revamped and going to be offered this fall. And it really reflects the evolving nature of the role of the building operator, energy manager, those who work in and with building systems. So we're excited about that, focusing on collecting and analyzing building data, HVAC controls, lighting controls, and then the communication piece of being able to present a plan, a building's walkthrough plan to outline some energy savings and other smart technology opportunities for their building. And I agree with Karen, why is this important to building professionals? I mean, I think it's the same for any profession. I think, lifelong learning should be everyone's goal, but specifically to buildings, just the dynamic, we don't deal with kind of static knowledge, 2 + 2 is 4 and always will be. The operations and maintenance and technologies in buildings is just continuously evolving. And I think because of that, being dedicated to continuing education is really important. And if you're looking to get into the field, having some credentials on your resume really, sets you apart from other people. So.
Thank you. So Roger, we've heard you have some great programs in controls and water and energy. You want to tell us a little bit more on why you think those are important?
Well, it's important because it keeps me employed. So as our panelists have been talking, I've been thinking, well, geez, what can I lend? And I'll go back to the BOC and its accreditation. There are a number of different strategies for getting continuing education. You can go to a community college and get continuing ed. You can continue it at WSU or Oregon State or someplace to get continuing education. But as Melanie said, we have these certifications that land in our lap, and it enhances our, not only does the instruction enhance our employment, but having that certification enhances our employment as well. The thing that I'm most interested in is the accreditation of that certification. And Melanie's, what is it, 5 years old now, Melanie? Your 17024 accreditation, something like that. I have to say, and I haven't said this to you yet, Melanie, but so you and I can have a conversation now. So when you guys got that, I was so impressed because it is not for the meek. It is not a process for the mild to go through. It is extremely rigorous, and therefore it puts that level of accreditation, through the roof in terms of street cred, essentially. I mean, when people take a look at the BOC, the accredited certificate, that's a big deal. the AEE, and ASHRAE just did that. The Association of Energy Engineers just did that with their CEM not too long ago. I mean, it's been a couple of years now, but that took that CEM and just elevated the credibility of that. I a number of years ago was on and still on a board of directors for the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, and that was my first exposure to the process of doing a certification. And have it be accredited by ANSI. Whew, that's tough stuff. So that's my opinion. If you're gonna be in this industry, you know, get your formal education, but continue, as Melanie said, continue that path to expanding your background, your education. It's a constant learning environment. But make sure that when you're doing certifications that you look for that ISO stamp or that ANSI stamp, because it's muy important, ridiculously important.
Thank you. And I think that it is really a vote of confidence when you're getting that certification, and something that's key to look for if you are pursuing continuing education. All right, Justin, we'll let you bat clean up here. You're not the education provider. What are what kind of trends are you seeing out there in the work that you're doing?
I think just kind of totally pivoting away from maybe professional degree programs or accreditation programs, but really, you know, the opportunities for folks that want to go actually build stuff and learn how to install the systems or retrofit the systems that consume energy in our built environment are always available through the professional trade groups. We're always going to need electricians to retrofit and install efficient lighting and systems, and we're always going to need plumbers to go out and actually implement the energy or the water savings measures that we find, or, you know, build our rainwater recapture systems, and controls professionals to make our buildings work. All of those skilled trades have an impact on the efficiency of our buildings, their ability to our ability to actually implement the projects that we find and determine through whatever means we come up with them, and then actually, you know, continue to make them work. And all of those trades have apprenticeship programs that, you know, once a person that's interested in those goes through with them, and then it's really like aligning themselves with an organization or a company that they like, so that they can, if they are really passionate about renewable energy, go work for a renewable energy installer, and whether that's solar or batteries or what have you. But those programs have been around for, depending on which one it is, you know, hundreds of years, some of them, and we won't be living without indoor plumbing, as far as I know, at least in my lifetime. So the plumbers will always be there, and they will always need more people. And how they go about doing their work might look a lot different in the future with, you know, virtual reality, and it's just not there isn't the opportunity that there was for training through apprenticeship, journeyman, foreman, general foreman, like it's been done for so many years. There's just not enough time before people retire and to learn everything. And so it will look a lot different and be more technical than it's ever been, no matter what the trade is. So I think that's one that, you know, people sometimes forget, but is very important, I think, to just our ability to influence our built environment's efficiency and the overall sustainability.
Absolutely, and thank you. And I'll put the shout out there with I've been really lucky to interact with so many amazing folks that have come up through the trades that we've seen in our program, and then also with the new apprentice programs that are being developed as we're seeing trades launch them and otherwise. You know, I think one of the best things that the opportunities that's out there is to get into a trade and go through that process, because it's you know, it launches an incredible career in buildings, and you're right, it's not ever going away. So I think we just launched a quick poll for the audience, you know, and I'm going to ask the panelists here too. We're kind of in a different world from where we were 4 months ago, and you know, I'd like to hear kind of with a short answer from our panelists, and then after that we'll move on to some Q&A from the audience. But the question is, what's the biggest change you're seeing in buildings after COVID? Melanie, could I get you to speak? And if it's not just in buildings, more if it's in the education space, happy to talk there as well.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. I think what will be the biggest change post-COVID will be occupancy. I don't think, many buildings are going to be back at the levels of occupancy that they were pre-COVID. So I think adjusting for that to optimize efficiency of your building, the health of buildings and their occupants will be very important. Improving indoor air quality, because there will be, HVAC upgrades, there's things like dedicated outdoor air systems. So I think the occupancy of buildings will really see a shift in the post-COVID. And then, Roger and I both alluded to this earlier about for education and training, it will look different. I think there will be this big push. I'll follow up with you, Steve, on the VR, and there's all kinds of, different opportunities, the landscape for training, just because, as I said, I don't think buildings will be as occupied as what they once were. Same for colleges and training centers and that. So it'll be interesting to see how we can all work together on that.
Absolutely. And looks like our audience is telling us that critical problem solving is really going to be one of the key skills that we're needing post-COVID. And I'll echo that. I think creativity is going to be the thing, and lots of the ability to solve the new problems as they come up. Justin, what about you? What are the big changes you're seeing in buildings, or think we're going to see in buildings?
I'd say the biggest change right now is just no one's in them. To reiterate a little bit of what Melanie said, so really, does that totally redefine how we use buildings and what we use them for? And I think the answer will be yes. We've had a lot of questions come in from people or clients that we've worked with about what to do with their buildings to make sure that when they actually have people in them, those people are safe and the environment is good for them to, safe for them to work in. But really then how do we help them accomplish that goal, but then also not just run a building 24/7, 365 with 100% outside air because that's what they think the CDC is telling them to do. And meanwhile, they're just wasting their, operational dollars like crazy. So the biggest change is really going to be in how people are using buildings. Are employees actually going to come back to buildings? And if they do, in what capacity? We set a 40% maximum occupancy for our buildings in our offices across the country. And I bet on the highest day here in Seattle, we might have been above 10%, which just means that there's a very large amount of space that for the last few months has really been unutilized. And I think that's very, very typical. So I think it's understanding what the new normal will be for buildings and then how we can best help owners and operators use those buildings or manage them is going to be a huge, huge swing for us all.
Absolutely, and changes in occupancy, moving to health, and then seeing how we can make things cleaner, greener, and more efficient as we make that transition.
Yep, absolutely.
Roger, what about you? What do you think the biggest changes we're going to see in buildings are?
I'm gonna echo what everyone else has said, and I think occupancy is going to be the big deal. And in fact, I was for the first time in quite a few months, I was in my building. It's in downtown Eugene, 90,000 square feet. We're remote to the main campus, which has 30 buildings on it. But while I was there today, some people were walking around. I didn't recognize them because they had their masks on, but they were walking around and they were doing an audit of each one of the classrooms. So when the college goes back, they will be able to let whoever it is that makes this determination, let them know what kind of space is going to be available with the personal distancing. And one of the comments was, boy, we're going from 30-person occupancy down to 8. And so this is going to be a new thing. The other thing is that, and Justin mentioned this, the other new thing is air. I work with, and I'm going to say his name just because I'm proud that I can pronounce it, Kevin van den Wijmelenberg, of all things. At the University of Oregon, Kevin is runs the Energy Studies in Buildings Lab, and he's gaining huge notoriety for a strategy that he has to increase airflow. And that's just the deal. The question was, how are you going to open up restaurants? Increase the airflow. How are you going to open up buildings? Increase the airflow. And so, and it's bringing in fresh air, not just making the air go faster. It's bringing in new outside air. And so I think the code that we have now is going to be reevaluated, and we're going to be using a lot more energy to address that. So we'll see. We'll see if we get back in our buildings.
Well, hoping so. I think my family's getting pretty tired of my cooking at this point, so I know they're hoping so as much.
Yeah.
Karen, what about you? What do you think these biggest changes we're going to see are coming out of this pandemic?
All of the above, everything that everyone has said, and really the air circulation and ventilation is huge. ASHRAE keeps coming out with new guidelines for opening up buildings. And I have a bunch of school districts on my RCM listserv, and there are a lot of school districts that will be impacted by the Washington State Performance Standard, and they're really struggling. And I've heard from education friends looking at just using classrooms that open up to the outside and not to hallways. And so the whole structure of the buildings and what parts of the buildings are used may change. Yeah.
I think so, and I think yes, education is definitely a challenge area for those of us in higher ed. But when we think about K-12, it's spoken with a number of people that are really trying to understand what that looks like, and it's definitely a significant challenge, and probably one of the biggest areas of change we're going to see in buildings. All right. Well, I think at this point we'll open it up and see if there are any questions from the audience. If you do have any questions, you can go ahead and enter them either in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll pose them to the panelists. We have our first question here, and it is: what is the commitment to energy efficiency in new and old buildings between public and private sector businesses? That's a great question, Arthur. Karen, I see you coming off mute. You want to jump in?
Yeah, so commitment. I'm not sure what the commitment is. However, we have a standard in Washington State that will become, the rules are being written now, and the rules need to be written by November, and then there's a long, many years to be able to, buildings are going to have a target, buildings over 50,000 square feet will have an energy target that they will have to meet. And it's per what their building use is. It gets a little complicated, so I won't get into that, but it is law. And so that's why commitment, they will have a commitment to comply with the law. And that is part of my job, is to support people in complying with the law with all sorts of tools and checklists. And Melanie's group at NEEC and SBC will be helping. And there is no difference. It is all commercial buildings, public or private. So that's what I really want to focus on for that. I could say more, but I'll leave it for now.
Thank you. Well, we do see a huge statewide and region-wide commitment happening, and with Washington State, with the Clean Buildings Act, driving a lot of change in the coming years. Justin, what are you seeing? I know you work with both private and public clients. What are you seeing with your customers?
I think on the private side, it's pretty exciting to see a couple of really big players in Washington and the Pacific Northwest, in Microsoft, primarily like making a major commitment to their, just their overall energy portfolio, but back to the very beginning of, working out of a garage kind of scenario, and trying to sort of rethink their whole operation and how they and their products are impacting the world. And I think that's a big one. I think today was a big day in Seattle. That we unleashed the Kraken, for those that pay attention to the NHL excitement. But Amazon made a pretty big statement by naming what has been known as the key arena for so many years here, Climate Pledge Arena. That is something that I would 5 years ago never ever would have guessed that would have been even on the radar. So to see the biggest private player in Seattle make that kind of a commitment, put their name on it, something so public, is pretty exciting. On the public side of things, the state of Washington, we have a pretty progressive governor when it comes to energy policies and standards, and he's kind of drawn a pretty big line in the sand for state agencies around their buildings and what those buildings will look like and perform. And so we're starting to see agencies step up and come up with plans to go ask the legislature for money to go execute on those things. And that's pretty exciting to see conversions off of natural gas onto electric only systems with a lot of renewables built into that. And it's a much different space when, 5 years ago, we were still advocating, putting in natural gas service to buildings that may not have had it, because that seemed like the most efficient way to go. Now the equation looks a lot different, and we're not having to educate people as much. They're leading us along the way. So.
And definitely exciting, and a lot of both with the unleashing the Kraken and with the climate arena. Fantastic to see. What about you, Roger? Do you have any comments on commitment in the both private and public sector?
Yeah, it's certainly not as significant as what's going on in Washington. I mean, if anybody's paying attention to the left coast, it's we're pretty progressive out here, and so ours is driven mostly. And I'm sure that there are organizations that are doing great stuff. They're not as public as Microsoft or Amazon, but I haven't seen anything as huge as those two. Every time I see the Amazon commercial on television, I go, geez, really, you guys doing that much? And they probably are. I think that's just a great deal. Ours is mostly code driven. And so if you are a private building, then you live by what our energy code is. And like the rest of the states on the West Coast, it is pretty restrictive compared to the rest of the other states. Most of the other states, there are some hot rods out there, but we pay attention to those codes. So if you have a public building, you step up in terms of the restrictiveness, in terms of what you could do. I call it restrictiveness. That's probably not the right word, but it's a 20% increase in efficiency, and so public buildings have to abide by that. And so it's like, I don't see a lot of people just jumping at it on their own. If somebody wants to contact me, I'll tell you a great story about the University of Oregon. But maybe I won't.
Well, thank you. And I continue to see that as well, as that looking inside the public sector, and especially looking with some of the challenges we have, it's clear that we're going to have to do more with less for a while, and that presents opportunities to garner energy savings. At the same time, with everything else that's happening, there's a lot of attention that's being diverted away from that. And whether we have the staff and we have the effort to make those upgrades is always a tough balance. Well, Melanie, what are you seeing out there? I know you have a lot of supporters and constituents across both areas. What are you hearing?
Yeah, we do, and but I don't really have too much more to add. I think Karen and Roger and Justin kind of touched on NEEC and Smart Building Center's perspective. And I know we've got some other questions coming in, so I want to allow us time for those.
Fantastic. Well, I think Perry asked a great question, and that is, for existing buildings, do you see a general shift from energy use intensity to carbon emissions as a transition in focus, or a transformation that we're playing catch up to? Melanie, can I put you on the hot seat?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll try to answer it as directly as I can, but I think there's a really big push to electrify buildings and transportation right now. I would say, that's number one. Next, probably more broadly, the energy efficiency community is thinking about it less as a way to adjust to the long-term planning of a utility, as energy efficiency used to be thought of, and more as a way to provide flexibility and that grid resiliency, relying more frequently on intermittent resources like wind and solar. In Washington, of course, with, we've talked about this a bit throughout the conversation, but with the passage of the 100%, well, I don't know if we've talked about the 100% Clean Electricity Act tonight, but, this is even more important. So this means thinking about buildings and the demand side as resources at which you can stack maybe energy efficiency, demand response, on-site generation, battery storage, so that they can respond faster to the needs of the grid. So to answer the question as far as, I think we might be playing a bit of catch up, but I think we're quickly gaining on that with our, with the efforts being made, at least here regionally.
Thank you. Roger?
Yeah, I am not really dialed into the topic, but when I hear something about it, my ears perk up a little bit. And what I've heard recently is that countries are starting to change the language, and it's going from energy efficiency to carbon. New Zealand, that's their language now. I have a colleague of mine who is in the cabinet in New Zealand, or whatever their structure is. And he sent me a deal not too long ago, an article not too long ago that was talking about they're getting rid of the sustainability terms and they're getting rid of the energy efficiency terms, and they just are focusing on carbon reduction, and they're rewriting all of their policy to address that. Now, I think they have on the order of 5 million people, so that's pretty easy to do, and something in a place like New Zealand, but I also do a little work in South Africa, and they are going down that path as well. And so generally I see this kind of shift, but I'm not sure that we're buying it here in the US.
Great international perspective. I'll Justin, I'll pick on you next, and I'll preface that by saying I've seen some really interesting work that McKinstry has done for Seattle colleges, looking at carbon reduction and a ton of different modeling that's been done, particularly for a proposed central utility plant or central utility eco district up on Capitol Hill for the Seattle Central College. And so, what are you hearing from your customers? Are they talking carbon more?
Definitely talking carbon a lot more. I would also say just greenhouse gases in general are a huge topic that comes up all the time, because I think that, a lot of our codes and a lot of our rules and a lot of what we're used to talking about is in EUI, but when you really boil it down to sort of the bigger picture climate impacts, carbon is one, and then just greenhouse gases in general. And I think so much has been learned in the last 5 years or less even around natural gas as a fuel source and how it was perceived to be super clean. But if you go read some of the articles on sightline.org and other publications locally here, it's like you learn more about it and you're like, wow, that's a big swing for us. And so that definitely becomes a different topic of conversation. Embodied carbon is a really big topic. Not meaning, what is in your existing building or what is your new building going to be built out of, and how much carbon went into that. And that's why you're seeing a lot more of the cross-laminated timber structures being looked at. The new building that McKinstry is involved with over in Spokane at the South Landing, which will have Eastern Washington University will be in that building. I think that Seattle Central is talking about a CLT building. There's a lot of local manufacturers looking at being able to build and ship and assemble CLT structures using more locally sourced materials than steel from overseas or concrete that's high energy use in order to, or energy burn in order to actually produce the material. So that's where we're seeing a lot of that is in just the structure itself as well. So.
Thank you. Karen?
So I think that's an interesting question. I agree with what, especially Melanie, I was saying. As far as the Washington State Clean Building Standard that I keep coming back to, the objective for that, I just looked it up to get the wording, is to lower costs and pollution from fossil fuel consumption in the state's existing buildings. So it's really focusing on carbon, but the way they're doing it is through energy use intensity, because that's the way that it's going to be measured. And they will be using Portfolio Manager for that as well. So everyone will be able to figure out what their energy use intensity is, and then they will have a target, and they will have to reduce their energy in order to reach that target. I was not part of creating the rules, and I wonder, it'd be a good discussion to have with the folks at Commerce and elsewhere. Maybe Melanie would know more about it, I don't know, and how they came up with energy use intensity. It makes sense. We've got Portfolio Manager, people have been doing that, but the purpose is using that in order to reduce fossil fuels and to look at carbon.
Do you want to make a comment there, Melanie?
The only comment I have is that would be a great question for some of my colleagues who are involved in that, but I don't, have any great insight as haven't been as involved.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that's been a great conversation around that, the question on energy use intensity versus carbon. And I think we have time for one more question before we kind of wrap up for the evening. And I'll riff on a question that Robert Vickers has asked here to the panelists. And to me, I think that the pattern we see is first you have to reduce the load. First, you've got to address that energy use intensity, whether you're doing that from a sheerly carbon perspective or not. We've got to get more efficient. But then Robert asks, what about renewables? What are we seeing in that world? Not just solar. Are we seeing other things, particularly in building integrated around wind? I'm wondering if anybody wants to jump in and talk about what are they hearing more about that? Is there more talk, or is this group really hearing just about the conservation focus? Roger?
I'll just give a little input, and that is the biggest deal in the renewable side is storage, energy storage, and it is growing like gangbusters in the States. Countries like Germany, they're all over this stuff. They even use it to refine their frequency on their grid system. I mean, it's not just the power of building, it's like to keep their grid system in shape. So I think that's what we're going to see. I don't know that this addresses your question, Robert, but I think what we're going to be seeing is just a ton more storage out there.
Justin, what about you? I know you're doing a lot of big integrated projects.
We are. I think that there's still so much opportunity in the efficiency part of the equation. The easiest renewable energy is the most efficient renewable energy is the one that isn't powering lights that are on during the day that are in a parking lot and that don't need to be, or running systems that are in buildings that are unoccupied. And you see that everywhere, even in new buildings, no matter what the building energy code might be. So We're definitely a long ways from having our building stock be as efficient as it possibly can. But I also know there's some cachet for renewables that we kind of have to have both here, because, you know, if we didn't, we'd fall behind and not understand like what works here and what doesn't. So there are still a lot of, I'd say, smaller scale renewable projects that are going on. Primarily, I think you see that almost exclusively because of just how inexpensive and low carbon our electricity is here to begin with. So that helps a lot, but it also doesn't drive a lot more of the large scale renewables that you would see elsewhere in the world. But I think as we get a little wiser towards what the true cost of our energy is, maybe we'll start to see those costs go up for the end user, that more and more renewables, more and more storage, as Roger said, will become, you know, part of the you know, more regular conversation.
Absolutely, and we have a utility rates and policy class, and got to hear a lot about that in the last in our last quarter, and it's definitely echoes exactly what both you and Roger are saying. Melanie, Karen, any comments on renewables?
I'm just not necessarily on renewables, but I will echo what the others have talked. Well, first of all, there's the saying, eat your energy efficiency vegetables first before you have your renewables dessert. But of course, some people like to eat dessert first. One thing that I have been slightly involved with lately is load shifting with utilities, and doing the load shifting is not necessarily renewables, but it means that renewables can cover the load, especially in the evening, say, for example, in California. And they're looking at load shifting through heat pump, water heaters. Heat pumps are a huge thing that's coming. I was going to talk about heat pumps at another question that we didn't get to. So they're looking at ways to do load shifting. It's kind of like demand response. It's a little different. So again, an indirect answer to that question.
Thank you. Melanie, you want to get the last word in?
Sure. I think, you know, if I tie this back, I think to buildings themselves, because as everyone made a really great case for, you know, this is, you know, Justin was talking about the true cost of energy in the Northwest and how this looks different in different regions. Karen, great point about load shifting in California. But I think if we tie it back to buildings themselves, I think, you know, there is still this push for energy efficiency. And then we see this, you know, kind of add-on as grid-enabled buildings and renewables. Roger, great point about battery storage. So as we tie that back to buildings, the ability for individuals to be able to manage the individual processes in a building, whether that's smart technologies, renewables, you know, enabling your building with the grid, with, you know, smart technologies, even in your home with hot water heaters, right, that are going to talk to the grid. That gives it, you know, there's just that broader context of both the building and the larger grid community needs at any given time. So yeah, I think that's, you know, just tying it back to individual buildings and the skills that we need to see for those operating. I did just get a question from a utility in the Northeast. Does BOC cover, you know, zero net energy? It's not really in our wheelhouse right now, but, you know, again, to the evolving nature of this industry. So.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for bringing it back around with all these changes, how important the opportunities are for creating new skills. And so I just want to thank all of you so much for joining us and your sharing your wisdom and insight, and to the audience for joining us this evening and participating. Thought we had a fantastic discussion. I'm going to turn it over to our one of our two incredible organizers, Alex Steele, to wrap up for the evening.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much, panelists. You gave an incredibly insightful conversation tonight to our audience, whether it's somebody who's emerging their knowledge set in terms of our industry for the very first time, or somebody who's been seasoned in it for the last 50 years. I think everyone on this call learned something new. Having a growth mindset, knowing how to solve problems. We know that buildings are here to stay, and we also know that change is a constant. So this is just really exciting. And coming up in the future, in terms of supporting all of you on this call that may be looking for jobs or maybe looking for jobs for friends of yours, we're going to be hosting a job fair this fall. It'll be virtual, and we're going to learn how to do this for the first time all together. So I invite you all to come back. And in our thank you note, we will have contact information for all of our speakers, as well as a copy of the deck, if it's okay with everybody, that we hand that out, along with a recording in case you weren't able to take some notes on some of these wonderful insights that you got here today. So thank you again. My name is Alex Steele. I'm the program manager for the Sustainable Building Science Technology Program. And I want to thank my partner in crime, Tanya Beavers from WSU Energy Program, for helping me put this on today. So everybody, I was going to say get home safely, but everybody's already home.
Justin, you can
go.
Okay, sorry, Justin. Most of you are already home, and you're part of the 10%, Justin. Thank you all again, and much gratitude.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone.